So imagine this, you've worked your whole life for this, the opportunity to work at the happiest place in the world where dreams come true, where Mickey Mouse is your neighbor and the backdrop of your office window is a stunning view of Cinderella's castle seen there. And then, in a blink of an eye, you have been summoned to your boss's office and told that you and hundreds of your colleagues are to be laid off. Not only will this process drag out for a few months, but you have been asked to train your replacement. Your replacement brought in by an outsourcing firm in India. Well, this is no fairy tale with a happy ending. This is actually a true story and a great place to bring in our roundtable, don't you think?
Yep, for our roundtable today, we bring in CampusReform.org's editor-in-chief, Caleb Bonham, and campus correspondent, Cabot Phillips. Thank you both for being with us today. Caleb, let's start with you. What do you think about this? I mean, a lot of kids coming out of college today, they're looking for jobs, very competitive marketplace, and then you look at Disney, and they're bringing in these EB-1 visa applicants, these genius visa applicants here, or employees, replacing the American workforce. Is this a sign of things to come?
Well, I think it's definitely an indicator of the special preference that is given to immigrants in this country in this particular time. You know, the Disney situation is an extremely difficult situation to listen to because 250 employees there were let go and then sort of in a very humiliating fashion forced to train their replacements. But we're still waiting on a lot of development surrounding this story. It's 250, and in the greater Orlando area, the positive sign of economic growth is that Disney employs over 70,000 people in that area alone. And so it is very discouraging, but we see this on college campuses where students coming maybe that are here illegally are given a special preference. They're maybe given specific scholarships like at New York University, as we've reported on at the Leadership Institute's Campus Reform, that aren't offered to other maybe in-state and legal residents of the country.
But Cabot, when you look at this too, you hear so many people saying, look, these foreigners come to the United States, they go to college here, they learn these skills, and we're in danger of losing them. There's going to be this brain drain here in this country, but apparently that's not the case.
Well, I don't want to jump the gun too much. You know, it was pretty hurtful when I saw this report about Disney. I'm a huge fan of Disney, but this is definitely something concerning we need to look at. We don't want to jump the gun until we have the facts, but it does appear that Disney may be taking advantage of some of these immigration laws. And if this is the case, then we really need to analyze what we're doing and who these laws are benefiting and who they're harming. And like my boss said, Caleb, we at Leadership Institute's Campus Reform have seen all around the country where many times illegal immigrants are given some special privileges. We reported on a case at CampusReform.org where tuition equity, this concept, is giving out-of-state students who are there illegally the chance to go to school at in-state rates that aren't available to students legally. So we need to definitely look at the laws.
I'm going to mention too, this comes from the New York Times too.
Yeah,
this
is not
some
some random
story,
report.
some random story, as Miranda mentioned.
I was just getting ready to say that. You just rubbed my mind. Yeah, this is the New York Times that's reporting that. And I don't want to just pinpoint Disney. It also talks about other companies, tech companies, also bringing in people, Microsoft, Facebook, and Google. Now, the excuse has always been that we can't find people in this country that have these skills. So that's why we have to outsource. But clearly that wasn't the case for Disney.
Find people with these skills willing to
You
accept
had people there,
this
you're
amount of money
laying
for this
them
job.
off, and you're bringing other people in. According to this report,
Well, exactly.
This is very disheartening.
And I think that it speaks to the need in higher education for preparing students for the workforce. What we have seen are courses offered on campuses that will, for instance, study the lyrics of Kanye West and how it applies and impacts your life on campus. Well, the truth is corporations and companies like Facebook and Microsoft and Google, and in this situation Disney, are outsourcing and using these laws, bringing in immigrants, legally, mind you, to replace and fill the jobs of these American workers, when in reality, we should be having a more employable workforce, and it starts in college.
An important
But that's not
clarification
the
there.
case.
This is
Yeah, but
totally
that's not
legal.
the case for this one. These, you know, like we're saying, these are people who obviously had the skills to do it because they're training these people to come in. It's not the same thing as saying, well, we tried, we just couldn't find any Americans here that were willing to do this job or have the skill set to do the job. Just want to make that clarification there.
Guys, we got about a minute left to go. We want to move on to our next topic, but we'll pick this back up when we have a commercial break. Again, in about a minute. A recent law passed in Texas is going to allow residents to carry concealed weapons on college campuses. We'll get your initial take real quick with about a minute left to go, and then we'll talk more about it, guys. Go ahead, Cabot, you first.
Yeah, well, we at the Leadership Institute's Campus Reform have seen a lot of states trying to shut down students' rights on campuses to carry. So we applaud Texas for their matters of empowering students. And I'm a student at Liberty University. We passed similar legislation. I was able to take the necessary courses and carry on campus. And I can say from personal experience that this is a good thing. I felt safer, and I spoke to many of my peers, and they agreed with me.
All right, Caleb, what do you think?
Yeah, at campus reform, a lot of the liberals misstep when they're trying to control how students can protect themselves on campus. We saw at the University of Colorado in Colorado Springs, women that felt threatened to and from classes that wanted to carry guns on campus were told, hey, you don't need to protect yourself against sexual assault by carrying a gun. You need to tell your possible rapist that, hey, you're on your period.
Let's take a timeout real quick right there,
That was their
Caleb.
defenses offered.
Hold on 1 second.
Yep.
We'll have more about that coming up right after this.
And welcome back to Newsmax Now. We want to welcome back our guest here for round 2 of our roundtable, campusreform.org's editor-in-chief, Caleb Bonham, and campus correspondent, Cabot Phillips. Thanks for sticking with us. Caleb, I'm sorry we had to go to a commercial. We didn't want to cut you off, but please continue with what you were saying before we move to the next topic.
Oh, I was just saying that these people that are trying to enforce gun laws on campus, and as is the case in Texas, where they were repealing the ability for students to carry inside of buildings, which students are now able to do so, generally comes from people that don't understand why people carry guns in the first place. And it is to protect themselves. It is to protect their fellow students. These are very law-abiding people, and they are not the concern here. Gun laws are not going to stop somebody from breaking the law. There's already a law against murder.
Right, but I'm going to say this, and I'm for people being allowed to carry concealed weapons or guns, but it is a little intimidating to be around that. I don't feel safer being around people carrying a bunch of rifles. I'm sorry, I just don't. But
that's interesting because I wanted to get your take. We heard this discussion with both Caleb and Cabot right before we went to break, talking about, and we discussed this earlier, a lot of discussion about sexual assault on campuses, and we know more women. Some of them do feel safe by being able to carry a weapon. Do you think that might have an impact on this scourge of sexual assaults on college campuses?
I hope so. I hope so. I mean, I can't say for sure, but I hope so. It's a deterrent. I also hope, though, we don't see violence go up in other ways, and that is what concerns me.
All right, well, time will tell. I do want to...
Well,
go ahead.
Well, you gotta be rational. I acknowledge the point you're making, and you're right. It is intimidating. But we're talking about concealed carry permits. We're not talking about people brandishing AR-15s in the middle of your creative learning class.
We talked about
what we're
this
talking
yesterday
about,
at
if you take a look at what happened in Georgia, at an airport, a man is walking around with a giant AR-15 in a completely inappropriate fashion that was intimidating and scaring people. And so it's looking at this from a very rational perspective.
Rationalism is a good idea. But I do want to talk about...
You said inappropriate, but it's not unlawful. But right.
Well, there's a difference between, and this also happened with the open carry in Texas. People were carrying AR-15 rifles into Chipotle's, and Chipotle said, you know what? Don't bring your guns in here. So if you take things too far, sometimes people will respond. Let's also talk about what some teachers are saying about this, guys. Some teachers expressing concerns, and they say that allowing students to carry on campus would pose a threat to teachers when it comes to students that are emotionally tied to their grade point averages. In other words, few teachers say, well, look, I'm going to be intimidated to the point where I'm going to give somebody a better grade because of their right to carry. What do you guys think? Go ahead, Caleb.
Well, I think it's absolutely silly. This same concept could be applied in any sort of scenario. Is a boss afraid that his employee may come in and because he has a Second Amendment right, demand a raise, and if the boss doesn't give him a raise, he's going to shoot him. I mean, this teacher and many people that have a similar mindset are not rational. They live in a liberal Hollywood world where what they see in movies applies in real life. That is not the case. It is completely irrational to think that any student is going to come in and say, oh, you got an F in my class? Well, here's my gun. That's not going to happen.
Well, I want to get your thoughts, Cabot. What do you think?
I think any student who is crazy enough to bring a gun into a professor's office and threaten them for a higher GPA is going to do that whether or not there's a law saying that they can bring a gun to school or they can't bring a gun to school. Criminals are going to break the law whether or not laws are in place. And I think that we need to look at rationally. Again, Caleb says this argument it doesn't hold water because it holds that any gun owner is inherently unreasonable, and that's just not true.
Yeah, but Let's look around what's going on in the media today. We've seen all these stories. We talked to a teacher who actually wrestled another student,
Right.
who he thought was going to harm other students, who was carrying a gun.
That was in high school, though.
That was in high school. But let's be honest. I mean, there are some mature college students. There are some people who are trained, and there are some that are not. I could see a teacher being intimidated with going to, I think that's just being honest. I think if you were a teacher in this day and age, I could see why you would be intimidated with your students coming to class with guns.
Now, when you guys look at this in a broader sense with what Texas is trying to do, making it in other states as well, not requiring to have a permit to carry a weapon, do you think that's the next logical step in this argument?
I'm not sure exactly what the next logical step is. What we have seen is 8 states across the country have removed any restrictions on campus concealed carry, and students are able to walk around freely as long as they've already achieved most of all of their permitting. They've gone through the license training, that sort of thing. And in many cases, as we see in Texas, for instance, you have to be not an 18-year-old, but you have to be a 21-year-old to be able to get your concealed carry license. So we're talking about seniors, grad students on average, people that are a little more mature. And as cliche as it is, the truth is you can go and fight for your country in war at 18 years old, but you can't carry a gun on campus concealed for the purposes of protection, in whatever reason it may be, until you're 21 or until it's unreasonable to do it when you're 20. I mean, that does not mesh up. You need to treat people like adults, and we need more of that in society.
I imagine we'll hear more about this in other states and other college campuses around the country. Caleb Bonham and Cabot Phillips from campusreform.org. Thanks so much.